David Cross wiped the grease from his hands with a worn rag, glancing at the chronometer on his workbench. Another birthday, another year older, and still alone in his cramped apartment above the repair shop. At 34, he'd long stopped, expecting surprises. The steady hum of atmospheric processors filtered through the thin walls of his quarters on Kepler 4m42b, humanity's most remote colony. Here, on the edge of civilized space, David had carved out a simple existence fixing broken starships and avoiding complicated relationships. It was easier that way. Less chance of getting hurt. A sharp knock on his door interrupted his brooding. "David, open up, you hermit." Jake Martinez's voice boomed through the metal barrier. David sighed, setting down his tools. His friend had probably brought another bottle of synthetic bourbon and stories from the cantina. That was Jake's idea of celebrating. The door slid open to reveal not just Jake, but Tommy Chen as well, both grinning like idiots. Behind them stood a sleek transport pod, its alien markings glowing softly in the evening light. "Happy birthday, brother." Jake slapped David's shoulder. "We got you something special this year." "What's with the pod?" David eyed the unfamiliar craft suspiciously. Its design was elegant, nothing like the utilitarian human vessels he was used to working on. Tommy bounced on his heels, barely containing his excitement. "Remember that high-stakes poker game in Sector 7? The one with the Altarian traders? You mean the one I specifically told you both to avoid?" "Well," Jake scratched his beard sheepishly. "Funny story about that. We didn't exactly avoid it. And we may have won something," Tommy added quickly. "Something unusual." Before David could respond, the transport pod's hatch hissed open. A figure emerged from within, tall, graceful, unmistakably alien, and undeniably female. David's breath caught in his throat. She stood nearly 6 feet tall, with skin that shimmered like moonlight on water, a pale silver blue that seemed to catch and reflect the colony's artificial lighting. Her hair flowed like liquid starlight, platinum white and reaching to her waist. But it was her eyes that held him captive. Deep violet, intelligent, and currently filled with what looked like nervous anticipation. She wore simple robes that somehow managed to look elegant, and when she moved, it was with a fluid grace that spoke of a species evolved for different gravity, different worlds. "Greetings," she said, her voice melodic with only the slightest accent. "I am Kira of the Zephyrian Cooperative. I have been assigned to David Cross as part of a cultural exchange program." David's friends stepped back, their grins fading as they registered his expression. "Assigned?" David's voice was barely above a whisper. Kira's violet eyes met his, and he saw something flicker there, uncertainty, perhaps even fear. "The traders inform me that human customs include bonded companionship arrangements, that you were in need of—" "Wait, stop." David held up his hands, his mind reeling. "What exactly did these idiots tell you?" Jake cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Look, David, we thought you could use some company. The trader said she was part of some program. You bought a person?" David's voice rose with each word. "What the hell is wrong with you?" "We didn't buy her," Tommy protested. "We won her fair and square." The Altarian said humans still practiced traditional bonding ceremonies and— "Get out." David's roar echoed off the metal walls. "Both of you, get out of here before I do something we'll all regret." His friends retreated hastily, leaving David alone with Kira. An awkward silence stretched between them as she studied his face with those impossibly violet eyes. "You are angry," she observed quietly. "Not at you." David ran a hand through his dark hair, trying to process the situation. "Look, I don't know what those idiots told you, but I'm not looking for a whatever this is supposed to be." Something shifted in Kira's expression, surprise, perhaps even relief. "You do not wish to claim bonding rights?" "Claim rights?" David felt sick. "You're a person, not property. You can leave whenever you want. Hell, I'll pay for transport back to wherever you came from." For a long moment, Kira simply stared at him. Then, to his amazement, her rigid posture began to relax. "No one has ever she began, then stopped. Among my people, I was considered defective, too independent, too questioning. When the opportunity arose to participate in this cultural exchange, I volunteered. I thought perhaps humans might be different. Different how? Less rigid, more accepting of those who do not fit prescribed roles. She looked around his simple quarters with genuine curiosity. You truly offer me freedom of choice? David nodded firmly. Completely. No strings attached. For the first time since emerging from the pod, Kira smiled. A radiant expression that transformed her alien features into something breathtaking. Then, David Cross, I choose to stay and learn about your world. If you will have me. Something in his chest shifted as he met her gaze. Maybe this birthday wouldn't be so ordinary after all. 3 days had passed since Kira's arrival, and David found himself constantly surprised by his unexpected guest. She'd insisted on sleeping on the small couch rather than his bed, despite his protests, and each morning he'd wake to find her, studying something new, his tools, the colony's industrial systems, or simply watching the twin suns rise through his viewport. The quantum resonance frequency in your plasma cutters is inefficient, she commented over breakfast, gesturing toward his workbench. You're losing 30% effectiveness. David paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. How could you possibly know that? Kira's cheeks took on a deeper silver hue. What he was learning was her version of blushing. Among my people, I was trained as a stellar engineer before my social difficulties became apparent. Social difficulties meaning you thought for yourself? Precisely. She smiled, that radiant expression that made his chest tighten. On Zephyr Prime, questioning established methods is considered a character flaw. David set down his cup and studied her face. Show me. An hour later, he watched in amazement as Kira's slender fingers danced over his equipment, making adjustments that should have been impossible without specialized tools. The plasma cutter hummed to life with a cleaner, more focused beam than he'd ever achieved. Incredible, he breathed, standing close enough to catch her scent, something like starflowers and ozone. You just improved a design that's been standard for decades. Their eyes met, and suddenly the small workshop felt even smaller. Kira's violet gaze dropped to his lips for just a moment before she stepped back. Perhaps you could show me more of your colony? She suggested, her voice slightly breathless. They spent the afternoon exploring the industrial district. David watched Kira's fascination with everything, the way humans worked together, the casual friendships, the lack of rigid hierarchy. At the cantina, Jake approached cautiously. David, look, about the other night. Forget it. David waved him off. Just, next time you win something in poker, make sure it's not a person. Jake glanced at Kira, who was examining the bar's atmospheric recycling system with professional interest. She seems different than what we expected. She's brilliant, David said quietly. And she was treated like damaged goods by her own people. Sounds familiar, Jake muttered, giving David a meaningful look. That evening, they sat on David's small balcony watching the stars. The colony's lights dimmed automatically for night cycle, leaving them in comfortable darkness. Tell me about your family, Kira said softly. David's jaw tightened. Nothing to tell. Orphaned at 8, bounced between foster homes until I was old enough to work. I'm sorry. Her hand found his, cool and soft. My parents, they tried to correct my independence through various treatments. When those failed, they agreed I should be sent away. Their loss, David said firmly, his fingers intertwining with hers. You don't really know me, Kira whispered. I know enough. He turned to face her fully. I know you're kind, brilliant, and stronger than anyone who gave up on you deserves. I know you make me want to be better than the hermit I've become. David, her voice was barely audible. I know I'm falling for you, he continued. And it scares the hell out of me because everyone I've ever cared about has left. Kira's free hand cupped his cheek, her touch electric. I'm not everyone else. Promise me, he said urgently. Promise me you won't disappear without warning. I promise, she whispered, leaning closer until her forehead rested against his. They sat like that for a long time, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. Two lonely souls, finding something neither had expected to discover. Tomorrow, Kira said eventually, I'd like to help with your work. Really help, not just observe. Partners? David asked. Partners, she agreed, and in that simple word, David heard the possibility of something he'd never dared hope for. A future where he wasn't alone. The next morning brought a distress signal from a stranded cargo hauler. As David prepared his rescue gear, Kira appeared beside him with tools he didn't recognize. Ready, partner? She asked with a smile that could outshine both suns. Looking at her, this extraordinary woman who'd chosen to stay, chosen him, David, felt something shift inside his chest. Maybe Jake had been right about one thing: he could use some company. He just never imagined it would change everything. The cargo hauler Meridian's Pride hung dead in space, its engines cold and crew desperate for rescue. David maneuvered his repair shuttle alongside the massive vessel, while Kira monitored the ship's vital systems with equipment that made his standard gear look primitive. Hull breach in Section 7, but it's been sealed, she reported, her fingers flying over holographic displays. Main power coupling is completely fried, but I can bypass it if we can get inside. Can you? David asked, matching her confidence despite the complexity of the situation. Watch me. 2 hours later, they floated in the Meridian's engine room, David holding position while Kira performed what could only be described as mechanical surgery. The way she moved in zero gravity was poetry. Graceful, purposeful, completely at home, in the harsh environment of space. Hand me the quantum spanner, she called, not looking away from her work. David passed her the tool, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Even through their work gloves, he felt that familiar electric tingle. Over the past week, these moments of contact had become increasingly charged, loaded with unspoken tension. There. Kira's triumphant voice echoed through their helmet comms as the ship's lights flickered back to life. Full power restored. Incredible, David breathed, genuinely awed by her skill. You just saved 23 lives. When they returned to his apartment that evening, exhaustion and adrenaline warred in David's system. Kira moved around his small kitchen, preparing a meal with ingredients she'd somehow procured from the colony's limited supplies. Zephyrian comfort food, she explained, stirring something that smelled like heaven. My grandmother's recipe. You never talk about family, David observed, settling on his couch. Kira's stirring slowed. Grandmother was the only one who understood me. She died when I was young, but she used to say that the universe brings together souls that complement each other. She turned to face him. I think she would have liked you. I would have liked her, David replied softly. They ate in comfortable silence, but David couldn't stop watching the way Kira's lips curved around her spoon, the graceful movement of her throat as she swallowed. The apartment felt smaller, more intimate in the soft lighting. David, Kira said suddenly, setting down her bowl, what we did today, working together. I've never felt so capable, so valued. You are valued, he said, moving closer on the couch. You're extraordinary. So are you. Her violet eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. You see me as I am, not as my people labeled me. The space between them charged with electricity. David's hand found her cheek, thumb tracing the delicate silver patterns that decorated her skin like living tattoos. Kira, he whispered. Yes, she breathed, leaning into his touch. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper as she responded with surprising passion. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and David was lost in the taste of her, the scent of starflowers and ozone that seemed to surround her. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kira's eyes held a heat that made his pulse race. I want, she began, then stopped, uncertainty flickering across her features. What do you want, Kira? You, she whispered. I want you. David's response was to kiss her again, deeper this time, his hands sliding around her waist. She was warm and solid, and real in his arms, not the impossible dream he sometimes feared she might be. Are you sure? He asked against her lips. I've never been more sure of anything. He stood, offering his hand, and she took it without hesitation. In his bedroom, with the stars of Kepler 442b's sky visible through the viewport, they came together, with a passion that surprised them both. Kira's skin was like silk under his hands, silver blue and luminous in the starlight. Every touch, every whispered endearment in her musical language felt like coming home. When she cried out his name, her back arching beneath him, David felt something fundamental shift in his universe. Afterward, she lay curled against his chest. Her platinum hair spilled across his pillow like liquid starlight. Her fingers traced patterns on his skin while his heart gradually returned to normal rhythm. I have never felt this way, she murmured against his chest. Neither have I. David admitted, tightening his arms around her. I was so afraid of letting anyone close. And I was so afraid of being rejected again. She lifted her head to meet his eyes. But this, us, it feels right. It does, he agreed, kissing her forehead. It feels like everything I didn't know I was missing. As sleep claimed them, intertwined under the alien stars, neither noticed the small ship that had taken position at the edge of the system, its hull marked with the flowing script of the Zephyrian Cooperative. David woke to the sound of unfamiliar engines overhead. Through his viewport, he could see a sleek Zephyrian vessel descending toward the colony's landing platform, its hull gleaming like polished moonstone. Beside him, Kira sat up abruptly, her face draining of color. No, she whispered. Not yet. What is it? David reached for her, but she was already moving, pulling on her robes with quick, efficient movements. They've come for me. Her voice was hollow. I should have known they would track the transport pod eventually. Who's come for you? Before she could answer, David's comm unit crackled to life. David Cross, report to the administrative center immediately. You have visitors. The administrative center buzzed with tension when they arrived. Captain Helena. Brooks, the colony's administrator, stood stiffly beside three tall Zephyrians whose presence seemed to fill the room. The leader, distinguished by intricate silver markings on his dark robes, turned as they entered. Kira of the Cooperative, he said in accented standard, his tone carrying centuries of authority. I am Ambassador Thorne. You will return with us immediately. Hello, Uncle, Kira replied quietly, and David felt his world tilt. Uncle, the cultural exchange program has been deemed a failure, Thorne continued, ignoring David entirely. Your contamination by primitive human customs ends. Now, contamination? David stepped forward, anger flaring. Who the hell do you think you are? Thorne's cold gaze finally settled on David. I am the one retrieving stolen property from thieves and degenerates. Property? David's voice rose dangerously. She's not property. She's a person who made her own choice. Humans, Thorne said dismissively, still believing in such primitive concepts as individual autonomy. Kira belongs to the Cooperative. Her specialized knowledge cannot be wasted on lesser species. Captain Brooks cleared her throat uncomfortably. Gentlemen, perhaps we can discuss this civilly. There's nothing to discuss. David cut her off. Kira stays if she wants to stay. Does she? Thorne's attention turned back to his niece. Tell me, Kira, what have these humans offered you? Manual labor? Primitive accommodations? The affections of a grease-stained mechanic? Kira's hands clenched at her sides. They offered me something you never could, Uncle. Respect, acceptance, love. Love? Thorne's laugh was cruel. You've been here mere weeks and you believe you understand love? You were always too emotional, too weak. This proves it. She's not weak. David stepped protectively closer to Kira. She's the strongest person, I know. And she's brilliant. More brilliant than anyone who gave up on her deserves. Silence, human. Thorne's patience was clearly exhausted. Captain Brooks, if you do not produce this female immediately, the cooperative will consider this colony in violation of our territorial agreements. Now hold on, Brooks protested. We can't just— Yes, you can, Thorne interrupted. Unless you wish to explain to Earth Command why your colony has been blockaded. David felt the walls closing in. Around them, colony security officers shifted, nervously, hands moving toward weapons they knew would be useless against Zephyrian technology. Kira, Thorne said, his voice becoming almost gentle. Come home. Your family misses you. Your place in the engineering corps awaits. This infatuation will pass. For a long moment, Kira said nothing. David's heart hammered against his ribs as he waited for her answer, terrified of what it might be. Then she stepped forward, her head held high. My place is not in your engineering corps, Uncle. My place is here, with David, with people who see my worth rather than my defects. You would choose this primitive over your own species? I choose love over duty. I choose freedom over security. I choose David over everything you're offering because what we have is real. Thorne's expression hardened. Then you are no longer Zephyrian. You are nothing. I'm everything, Kira replied firmly. For the first time in my life, I'm everything I was meant to be. The ambassador turned to his companion, speaking rapidly in their musical language. David caught enough to understand they were discussing force, extraction protocols, acceptable losses. You want her? David said loudly, drawing their attention. You'll have to go through me. And us, Jake's voice came from the doorway. David turned to see his friend entering with Tommy and a dozen other colonists all armed. And us, Captain Brooks added reluctantly, her own weapon now visible. Thorne's eyes narrowed as he calculated odds. The Zephyrians were technologically superior, but they were outnumbered and deep in human space. This is not over, he said finally. The cooperative does not forget. The cooperative does not forgive. The cooperative can go to hell, David replied. As the Zephyrian delegation filed out, Thorne paused beside Kira. You have chosen exile, niece. There is no path home from this decision. I am home, Kira said quietly. When they were gone, David pulled Kira into his arms, feeling her trembling against him. It's over, he whispered into her hair. But even as he held her, David couldn't shake the feeling that it was just beginning. 6 months after the confrontation with Ambassador Thorne, David stood in his workshop watching Kira explain quantum dynamics to a group of fascinated engineering students from the colony's technical academy. Her confidence had grown immeasurably, and seeing her share her knowledge freely, without fear of being labeled defective, filled him with pride. The key is understanding that quantum entanglement isn't just theoretical, she was saying, her hands dancing as she illustrated complex concepts. When properly applied to propulsion systems, we can achieve efficiency increases of over 200%. Professor Kira, one student asked, is it true that Zephyrian ships can travel between star systems in days instead of weeks? Kira's smile faltered slightly. Even now, mentions of her homeworld could still cause her pain. Yes, but that technology requires resources and cooperation your people aren't ready for yet. After the students left, David found Kira on their balcony. He'd officially moved her into the bedroom months ago, staring up at the stars. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, feeling her relax against him. Thinking about home? He asked gently. Thinking about how the word home has changed meaning for me, she replied, covering his hands with hers. I used to think home was a place. Now I know it's a person. Kira, he began, then stopped, his courage failing him. She turned in his arms, those violet eyes studying his face with concern. What is it? David took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee, pulling out a small box he'd been carrying for weeks. Inside nestled a ring unlike anything made on Earth. He'd crafted it himself, incorporating a fragment of Zephyrian crystal Kira had kept from her transport pod, setting it in polished titanium from his workshop. "I know your people don't have marriage customs like ours," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "But I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours, for as long as you'll have me." Kira's hand flew to her mouth, tears gathering in her eyes. "David, I love you," he continued. "I love your brilliant mind, your kind heart, the way you make me want to be better than I am. I love how you see possibilities where others see problems. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him up for a kiss that tasted like joy and starlight and promises of forever. The ceremony took place 2 weeks later in the colony's central plaza, officiated by Captain Brooks and attended by what felt like half the settlement. Jake served as best man, still occasionally shaking his head in amazement at how his poker winnings had led to true love. As they exchanged vows under the alien sky, Kira's voice was clear and strong. "I promise to love you not just for who you are, but for who you helped me become. You saw worth in me when my own people saw only flaws. You offered me freedom when others offered only duty. With you, I am not defective. I am complete." David's response was equally heartfelt. "I promise to never let you doubt your worth again. To support your dreams, to stand by your choices, to love you exactly as you are. You saved me from a life of loneliness and gave me something I never thought I'd have, a future worth fighting for." That night, in their bedroom decorated with both human and Zephyrian traditions, they came together as husband and wife with a passion that had only deepened over the months. Kira's skin seemed to glow with an inner light as she moved above him, her platinum hair creating a curtain around their faces as she whispered endearments in her musical language. "My heart, my home, my everything," she breathed against his lips. As they moved together in perfect harmony, "Forever," David promised, his hands tangling in her starlight hair. "No matter what comes, we face it together." When they lay entwined afterward, Kira traced the scars on David's chest, marks from years of hard work and harder living. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Choosing me over a simple life?" "Simple was just another word for empty," David replied, kissing her forehead. "You didn't complicate my life, Kira. You completed it." A year later, their small apartment had been expanded into a proper home and workshop where Kira taught advanced engineering, while David ran the most successful repair operation in 3 sectors. Students came from across human space to learn from the brilliant Zephyrian who'd chosen love over duty. Late one evening, as they worked side by side on a new propulsion design that could revolutionize human space travel, Kira looked up from her calculations. "David, I received a message today from Zephyr Prime." David's hand stilled on his tools. "Thorn?" "No. From the Council of Engineers. They've been following my work here, the improvements I've helped implement. They want to apologize, to invite me back as a senior researcher." "What did you tell them?" Kira smiled, that radiant expression that still made his heart skip. "I told them I was already exactly where I belonged, that I'd found something more valuable than their recognition. I'd found a partner who values collaboration over hierarchy, love over protocol. And I told them that if they truly wanted to learn from my work, they could send students here to study not just advanced engineering but advanced thinking." David set down his tools and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "I love you, Mrs. Cross. I love you too, Mr. Cross. Now and always." Outside their window, the stars of Kepler 442b shone down on the colony that had become home to the most unlikely love story in human space. A tale of how the best gifts are sometimes the ones we never knew we needed, and how love can bridge any distance, even the space between worlds.